What's up, guys? Justin here with TheSketchUpEssentials.com. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about a tip that can really help you improve your viewport performance when working in layout and make it a lot faster. Let's go ahead and just jump into it. So this is something that hasn't really gotten discussed since it was released in version 2024, and it's something that can actually make coming in here and doing things like dimensioning a lot easier. So right now what I have here is I have a series of cabinets, and within my series of cabinets, not only do I have the cabinets, but I've also got all these different accessories and things like that, and within this viewport, it's just a whole bunch of stuff. And on top of that, with the whole bunch of stuff, I've got a whole bunch of things like I've got my ambient occlusion, and it can make coming in here and adding dimensions and things like that a little bit difficult. Plus, depending on the speed of your machine, if you're hybrid rendering things like this plant right here, it can be really slow to move around in the viewport. My computer's pretty top end, so I'm not having trouble with that. But if you are, this is one good way to fix that. So what you want to do is you want to go up to Edit, Preferences, right here, and we want to go to Performance. And so when you go to Performance, notice how there's an option in here for draft mode. So what draft mode does is it basically turns off all that extraneous stuff. So like your thicker line edges and your ambient occlusion and things like that whenever you move around in the viewport. Now, when I check this, notice how there's a few different options that we're going to take a look at. The first one is just using this to improve your performance. And so what this does is basically it allows you to navigate around. And notice when I navigate around, this goes into kind of this like lighter weight version. And as long as I'm still navigating, this stays in the lighter weight version. And it only comes in here and renders out the different effects when I stop moving around. And you can set how long it is before it redraws in those heavier effects with a slider, which we'll take a look at in a second. But basically what this is doing is this is making it so you can navigate around and it's only showing you the lines and edges in here and nothing else, which is great because you don't have to worry about waiting for all that stuff to load and having all this distracting stuff in here. Now, notice how inside of the draft mode settings, there's an option for the redraw delay. So notice how if I turn that redraw delay all the way up and then I move around, it's going to wait 3 seconds after I'm done navigating to redraw that stuff in. So it gives you a whole bunch of additional time in here before it redraws all of those like hybrid rendering additional effects and things like that. So notice how you can use this in order to quickly navigate without having to worry about all of those effects loading in here. Now, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of doing it this way, only because I find it really distracting. I've moved this back down to short, but I find it really distracting where it's like reloading this every half second and things like that. What I like to do instead is I like to come in here and click on the drop down for always on. And so when I turn this to always on, and I have draft mode turned on, notice what that does is even though I have a hybrid viewport in here that's going to display a whole bunch of effects, when I'm doing things like dimensioning out my cabinets, I don't necessarily want that, right? I just want to be able to come in here and find these different edges right here and just add my dimensions. Well, if I turn draft mode on, it puts me in this lightweight mode where I can just come in here and I can just find the edges that I want like this. So I'm going to try to find like a midpoint. And then I can add this right here really easily. And notice how those effects are never really loading in. So because those effects are never really loading in here, it gives me this nice lightweight workspace that I can work in like this. So I can use this in order to add all of my dimensions. And then when I'm done with that, I can just go back to my edit preferences and I can just either toggle draft mode off or I can go back to the pan and zoom only. So notice how now my effects are back in here, but I find it a lot easier to find the various points of things that I'm trying to dimension in here by toggling that draft mode on. Now, there are a couple other options in here which I want to take a look at. The first is more of an extreme performance tool. So that's Disable SketchUp Viewport Drawing. And so if you check the box for Disable SketchUp Viewport Drawing, notice how instead of this showing you the lightweight version, when you pan and zoom, it's actually going to toggle the model off completely. So if you have just a really, really heavy model and your computer is just struggling to draw all of this stuff, what you might do is you might toggle on this Disable SketchUp Viewport Drawing. And you could even toggle this always on. If you toggle the always on, like this, what that's going to do is that's going to make it where it's not redrawing inside of the viewport at all. So you could use this on your really slow models in order to just kind of move into a space right here, and then you could toggle this back to pan and zoom only, like this. And so one other thing that I find helpful, and this is good to know, is if you go into your filter right here and you look for draft mode under layout preferences shortcuts, there's a keyboard shortcut of K to toggle this on and off. So I might put that under like a Shift D is something that I would like a little bit better. But now if I look in my performance, right, you can do a Shift D in order to toggle that on and off. And so what I might do is I might set draft mode to be always on like this. And then I might just set this up where I can do a Shift D in order to toggle it on and off with my keyboard shortcut. So if I'm coming in here and dimensioning, I want to do a Shift D to go into draft mode so that I can just see these edges in here without all the extra thicknesses and things. Then I can do a Shift D again in order to toggle that off. So this is actually one of the more helpful features for layout that doesn't really get talked about a whole bunch. All right, so two things. First off, leave a comment down below. Let me know if you've been using draft mode. I'd love to find out if you have and how you've been using it. And second, any suggestions you might have for making this even better. I do find this is a significant performance saver, and I'd love to hear any additional ideas that anyone has for making something like this better. I know sometimes the SketchUp team reads the comments in my videos, so if you do have ideas for things that might make this mode even better, leave them down below. But as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.